we were talking about the month of Nisan. That's where we started. The month of Nisan is the first month of the year, so we were talking about Pesach, everything that Pesach, stands for, the concept of Exodus, the concept of going out into redemption, the concept of becoming a nation. One of the most fundamental dimensions of Pesach and the whole festival of Pesach is the concept of the Jewish people becoming a nation, chosen by God in order to be able to fulfill God's will over here in the physical world. And Nisan is the beginning. Nisan is the potential of all of that. Just as the seventh day of Pesach, here, maybe before we go any further, just a little idea about understanding the way that the festivals work in general. The most important day of Pesach is the seventh day of Pesach. Right? Even though, if you ask anybody which is the most exciting day of Pesach, they'll tell you it's Leil HaSeder. Right? The first night, when everything is happening, everything is new, it's all very, very, very exciting. And, people wait with the most incredible anticipation to be able to have their Leil HaSeder. By the seventh day of Pesach, people normally are dreaming about rolls and, whatever, pizza and all kinds of chametzdika things, right?
I remember, Rabbi, I thought that the most exciting part was the cleaning.
Well, actually, I'll tell you, just between you and me, I hope nobody else is listening, but just to give you an idea of what a sad and sorry fellow I am. I love cleaning for Pesach. I love throwing things out. I really do. And I get some kind of... I think I would like to think it's a spiritual thrill by taking out bags and bags worth of stuff that's just got to be thrown away. I hate the accumulation of all of this stuff. I really do. So I think the cleaning, it depends who you are, whether the cleaning is the most exciting part of Pesach or not. But nevertheless, the seventh day of Pesach is supposed to be the most exciting day. The seventh day of Pesach, of course, if anybody here is familiar with what goes on, we went out of Egypt on the first night. On that night, we went out of Egypt, we traveled, and on the seventh day we went through the Red Sea, which means passing through the Red Sea is the seminal moment when the Jewish people become a nation, and that's it, we're gone. We've left Egypt behind. It's finished. And that makes the last day of Pesach, the culmination of everything that Pesach stands for, is going to be found in the seventh day. It's complicated, it really is, because inside of Judaism, the climax of something is normally the most important part spiritually. So I think we spoke about this a little bit when we spoke about Hanukkah, for those of us that were around, but spiritually, the most climactic part of Hanukkah is the 8th day of Hanukkah. Again, ask anybody, they'll tell you the most exciting day of Hanukkah is the first night, right? And of course, once you've been eating for 8 days, you've been eating, oily latkes and donuts, and the idea of eating another one is something which sort of makes you feel rather queasy. It's not such an exciting thing anymore. But we're supposed to be working our ways up in spirituality. We're supposed to be moving upwards, and each day inside of Hanukkah is another, the light. There's more light than there was the day before, and more light than the day after, and after, until you reach the 8th day when you've got maximal light. So too in Pesach, we start off Pesach on the first day. By the time we get to the 8th day, we've reached a climax of connecting together with God, of eating, not eating any leaven, of making ourselves, in a sense, just making ourselves smaller than we were in order to recognize, trying to realign our egos a little bit in order to be able to do what God wants us to do. It's a lot of work because, like I said, the first day of Pesach is the most exciting day, and after that everything becomes a little bit more normative, but it's something that we need to work upon. It really is. Just to give you an idea, the Vilna Gaon, he lived about 250 years ago. He says that each kazayit, which is a certain volume of matzah, not very much, a certain volume of matzah that you eat, each kazayit of matzah that you eat over Pesach is a new mitzvah.
Why? But it's the same as the matzah, so why is that any mitzvah?
Because each kazayit is its own, is enough to warrant your having to be able to make, in order to be able to bench afterwards. Right, which means that in the idea of the Vilna Gaon, the idea that eating matzah is a mitzvah in and of itself, and there needs to be a minimum amount of matzah that you can eat in order to fulfill the mitzvah. It's not just a mitzvah on the first night of Pesach to eat matzah, but throughout the whole of Pesach, every time you come and you eat matzah, you're fulfilling a new mitzvah and a new mitzvah and a new mitzvah, and it's something that needs to be something exciting. Yeah.
What's leaven?
Leaven is flour that has it's gone through a process, and it's difficult for me to explain this clearly. But leaven is chametz. Chametz is anything that's been through a process of fermentation, right? So, for example,
If it has yeast,
it doesn't need yeast actually.
Right, but I mean,
But flour,
usually
all flour that is not kosher for Pesach is leaven.
Okay. So why is it so stressful to sweep up the floors and throw out your bread?
Good.
I mean, that doesn't sound that difficult.
Good.
I've never done this.
Good question. I'll tell you, the emes is like this, right? Listen very carefully to what I'm telling you, because in a few years' time, in Mitzvah Hashem, you're going to remember this,
We're
right?
gonna do Pesach this year.
Okay,
Yeah,
but now
right.
doing Pesach this year, you'll probably do it the way that you've just described it. But in Mitzvah Hashem, once you get married, and your wife is going to take her Pesach cleaning very, very seriously, and you're going to begin to realize that it's a difficult moment. In order to fulfill the cleaning of your house for Pesach, you're right. All you've got to do is you've just, sweep the floors, wash the floors, get rid of anything that's got chametz inside of it. And it's really not that complicated. You should know that Rav Scheinberg used to say, one of the greatest rabbis in the previous generation, he died not very long ago actually, he used to give all kinds of shiurim before Pesach, and he used to teach the ladies that cleaning for Pesach is not spring cleaning, it's two different things. The ladies take the opportunity, I think, because we're cleaning anyway, to go a little bit overboard, some do anyway, and it's true, an awful lot of what's being done for Pesach has got nothing to do with Pesach itself. It's just an opportunity to clean out a little bit. My mother always used to say that Pesach was invented by HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all housewives like herself who never actually really got around to cleaning thoroughly, right? So they clean for Pesach at least once a year. Here, all of those wonderful bags of garbage that I was talking about that I like taking out and throwing away on Erev Pesach, they've got nothing to do with Pesach, for sure not. It's just an opportunity to take care of what's going on. So cleaning for Pesach, that's a complicated business. One thing that you need to be careful with, and for all of you who are Mitzvah Hashem, if you're married, then yes, it's applicable to us now, but for those of you that are Mitzvah Hashem are going to get married in the not so distant future, then you should know that Leila Seder night is sometimes the most difficult night of the year for the ladies, because they've been working so incredibly hard and they're completely and absolutely wiped out by the time they get to Seder night. They sit down at the table and they're not really aware of what's going on. I've spoken to many ladies who talk about when in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, where you have to have two Seder nights, where they much prefer the second Seder night because the first one they're finished. And I think as husbands and husbands in the making, we have to try very hard, especially on the few days right before Pesach, to pitch in and to help as much as we can in order that our wives can turn up at the Seder night, at least feeling halfway human.
Is that what it's supposed to have a nap for Seder night?
Well, yeah. But try to, it's a kind of, you're supposed to have a nap before Seder night. As kids, we were always made to go to sleep, and we never went to sleep. And of course, the kind of thing that the adults would love to do and can't, and the kids can and they don't want to. So, isn't that wonderful? I guess the other alternative is to have the kids in charge of getting Seder ready, and you can go and have a sleep. I don't think that's a great idea either, somehow. Anyway, from the second night of Pesach onwards, we start counting something called Sfirat HaOmer. Sfirat HaOmer is counting 50 days from the day after Pesach until Shavuot. We'll get to Shavuot in Mitzvah Hashem at some point, probably not today, but you know what, maybe today, we'll see. But we count every single night at Ma'ariv time. We count the Omer, and we count it together with a blessing. and you count every day, and then you count the weeks as well. So for the first week, there are no weeks to count, so you just count today is the first day of the Omer, today is the second day of the Omer. Then you get to the seventh day, you say today is the seventh day of the Omer, which is 1 week. And then after that, it's the 8th day, which is 8 days and one week and 1 day of the Omer, and then 1 week and 2 days of the Omer. Hold on a second, you count week by week by week until we get to the completion of 7 complete weeks. 7 times 7 is 49. At the end of the 49th day, we then commemorate Shavuot. Just very briefly, the halachas are very simple. You're supposed to make a blessing every night. If you forgot to count the Omer for that day, you can count it during the morning or during the daylight hours. You can count it. We count it without a blessing and just say, today is the 5th day of the Omer, whatever day it is. And then you can carry on counting in the evening with a blessing and keep going. If you missed out a whole day and it got to evening time and you realized that you'd forgotten to count the day before, then you should count the Omer without making a blessing from then on. Yeah, sorry, yes.
You said the last day of Pesach represents the day of the crossing the Red Sea, and the first day of counting the Omer follows immediately after that.
Yeah.
So does that mean that it was the second day in the land that, well, not yet the land, but that they had crossed? It would have been the second day after they crossed Red Sea. The first.
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear enough. The counting of the Omer begins on the second day of Pesach, which means Seder night is the first day, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then
Second
the second night. So if you're keeping 2 Seders, it's actually built into the Seder itself. And if you're not, you say it in shul, which means that the 7th day of the 7th day of Pesach is the 6th day of the Omer. You've already been counting for 6 days, yeah.
Do you know when Shavuos is this year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
50 days after the Pesach.
Thanks. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I stick with me, right? Don't say I never taught you anything.
Okay. All right.
No, I don't. Does anybody here know the dates of Pesach this year? Yeah, Binyamin's got all this stuff stashed away somewhere. So let's find out when Pesach is, and then we'll find out when Shavuot is.
Pesach is Erev
Pesach
Shabbos,
is,
which is great.
Pesach, the Leila Seder is Shabbos night, right?
Friday night.
Right.
Really?
What date? You got a date?
It's late.
Huh?
April.
It's Motzei Shabbat.
No, it's Friday night.
Friday night. The 3 of April. The 3rd.
The third of April. The 3rd of April. Yeah.
April, yeah.
3rd of April. Okay, so Shavuot is going to be when? Probably in May, right towards the end of May, I guess. No.
Yeah, the 23.
The 23rd of May. Okay, now.
Which is what day is that?
It's Saturday night.
Saturday night. Good. So it means that we've got Shavuot is going to be Shabbos, and it's going to be.
People sleep and learn all night.
Huh?
People sleep and learn all night.
Yeah, very good. Okay, good. Very good. Okay, so that's the month of Nisan. The month of Nisan, again, potential. From Nisan, we move into the next month, which is the month of Iyar. Right? What is Iyar? Iyar is the month that's going to take us from Nisan to Sivan. Sivan is a month that's got Shavuot in it. It's a month in the middle, and it's got a very special day inside of it. The 33rd day of the Omer is what's called Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is a day where we commemorate the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, for those of you who are not familiar, was the author of what turned into the Zohar. He didn't actually write it himself. It was written by his students. There's a very famous story that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar, ended up staying in a cave for 10 years with nothing there except for a carob tree and some water. And they stayed and they studied Torah to its deepest depths. And the Zohar, we're talking about the most esoteric dimensions of the Torah. We're talking about what has turned into what we would euphemistically call the Kabbalah, I imagine. Divrei Kabbalah. All of that was put together by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It was revealed by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar. On Lag BaOmer, that's the date which according to most opinions is the day that he passed away. He's buried in Meron. Did you go to Meron when you went up north?
We went to his grave.
You went to his grave. So I would imagine it was probably pretty busy over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, if you go, just imagine this place. You can picture it in your mind, right? You go to this place on Lag BaOmer. There's anything between 350 and 600,000 people that come to visit Lag BaOmer to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, right? So if you can imagine this tiny little place, which is absolutely stuffed full of people coming, a constant stream of people coming and going. Every year, the Israeli authorities, they try to work out a way of being able to set up a system which is going to make it easier to get to and easier to get out of. And I must admit that every year they fail abysmally and the whole system comes crashing down and there's enormous traffic jams. And
how many people get trampled to death each year?
no, actually, strangely enough, it's unlike Jeddah, right? What's it called when they come from the Hajj? No, people don't get trampled to death over there. What is possible, because it's a Jewish thing and there's so many people there, it could be that people might overeat themselves to death. That's possible. The amount of food and drink that's available for all these people that are coming for free is absolutely extraordinary. The Jews. What can I tell you? That's we seem to be somewhat fixated with food. Of course, saying that to someone whilst they're eating cake is, Now you're saying it's not a fixation. This is life, right? Marie Antoinette, if she would have been Jewish, she wouldn't have said let them eat cake. She would have said let them eat rogalach. I imagine that's or she would have just said es mein kind. That's, right? Eat, my child, eat. But the month of Iyar. So the month of Iyar is a month that's it doesn't have very much happening inside of it except for Lag BaOmer. For those people who are counting the Omer, it's considered to be a rather sad time. Originally, it was a very, very happy time. It was a time that was considered, it was a time when the harvests were coming in. People were coming to Jerusalem the whole time. But there was a very, very sad event that took place through the period of what's called Sfirat HaOmer, where the Talmidim, the students of Rabbi Akiva, 22,000 of them, they died in a plague. And it was a very tragic time. The Gemara actually says that the deaths of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva was worse. It was more tragic than the destruction of the temple, because the temple was a building made out of sticks and stones. The 22,000 students of Rabbi Akiva were the future of the Jewish people. And Rabbi Akiva, after his students died, he then started up again with 5 students, one of whom was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he taught them everything he knew, and they established the rabbinic tradition for the generations that came afterwards. That's part of what we're celebrating on Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer has got a lot to do with fire, bonfires. It's National Pyromaniacs Day here in Israel, and the kids for months before, from Pesach, basically, they're busy collecting wood. Just make sure that your dining room table is screwed down to the floor, because otherwise your kids will get it and they'll take it out and take it off to the bonfire that they're building. The same is true for your doors and anything else, kitchen cabinets. Make sure everything is screwed on tight, otherwise you won't have them again. The idea of fire is the idea of, the Torah is analogous to fire, the idea of giving us heat, the idea of giving us life, the idea of fire being dangerous as well, which means that you've got to know how to relate to the Torah, you've got to learn the Torah properly, otherwise it becomes something which can become quite deadly, actually, it can be lethal. Just one other idea about Sfirat HaOmer before we move off into the month of Sivan, or maybe not, we'll see. The Omer offering, which was what was brought on the second day of Pesach, was an offering made out of barley. Now, I don't know if you know anything about grains. We are very contrary. That the generation that we live in is a generation that we're sort of like I think we're going backwards, actually. Barley is considered to be animal food, and wheat is considered to be human food. And on Pesach, we offer up, on Sfirat HaOmer, we offer up the offering of barley. That's because spiritually we're still like animals. We've just come out of Egypt. We haven't received the Torah yet. We haven't built ourselves up spiritually in order to be able to get to Har Sinai and to say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will learn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore we are akin, we're like animals. So we offer up the Omer offering of barley, and then we count day after day after day. And when we get to Shavuot, which is 50 days later, the offering of Shavuot is what's called Shtei Alechem, 2 loaves of bread, which are made out of wheat, brought and offered up in the temple. And the idea, again, the symbolism is very clear, that wheat is human, that's food that's fit for humans. We started off spiritually as animals, and we've now worked our way up, and we've reached a spiritual level where we're able to have something made out of wheat, which is human food. We've become human beings. We live in a generation where now things are back to front, which means that bread made out of wheat is cheaper than bread made out of barley. If you want bread made out of barley, you've got to go to special bakery boutiques in order to be able to get this special kind of bread. They imagine that it's healthier, and whatever. We're sort of like moving in different directions at the moment. But however much barley bread you eat, and if there are people who eat barley bread, I'm sure it's very good. Right? Don't misunderstand me. But when it comes to spiritual terms, we're supposed to be wheat people, not barley people. Barley is for animals. Again, don't misunderstand me. If you eat barley bread, it doesn't mean you're going to turn into an animal. And I'm not suggesting for one second that if you only eat wheat bread, that you are not an animal. I'm just suggesting that in symbolic terms, each one represents something different from the other one.
Wheat, to Pesach you can't have.
You can't have, the only wheat you can have is a wheat that is used for the matzahs. Wheat which is taken very special care of. It's harvested. The whole time it's been harvested, it's looked after. It shouldn't come in contact with any kind of liquid. Regular flour is not kosher for Pesach. The reason for that is because regular flour goes through a process, a cleansing process, where you normally put in either a little bit of bleach if they're making it white, or at least it's going through a process that's going to turn it into chametz, and that's why flour is not used over Pesach. The only flour that gets used is flour made from things that cannot turn into chametz, cannot turn into leaven. So, for example, potato starch is used as a flour substitute. There are other things that you can use as well. Again, Sfardim and Ashkenazim, there are 2 different customs over here. The Sfardim eat something called kitniot. Kitniot are pulses. So, for example, beans, peas, rice, hummus. In the Sephardi world, some people use hummus, flour made out of hummus, ground down hummus. That's okay as well for Pesach. Rice flour, if you can get it kosher for Pesach, is okay for Sephardim to use. For Ashkenazim, it's not okay to use because the Ashkenazim took upon themselves a stringency not to eat kitniot. It's to do with the similarities that exist between things that become chametz and pulses. So they tend to, for example, rice swells up. It's got a certain similarity. It's got an enzyme in it which is similar to chametz. It's not chametz. It really isn't. Please don't misunderstand me. If you're a Sephardi, it's 100% okay to eat kitnios on Pesach. And if you are an Ashkenazi, then you should not be eating kitnios on Pesach. Yeah.
Eating matzahs on Pesach, like where does the prohibition from chametz come from? Is it really like because they didn't have time to let the bread rise?
So it's interesting. In the Torah, it says the Torah, God commands us on a few occasions not to have any chametz in the house on Pesach, and to eat matzah. Right? There are 2 different places. Where does the matzah come from? So according to one set of the verses, the matzah came because they took the dough and it didn't have time to raise before they left Egypt, so they made matzahs out of what they had. Right? However, God commanded the Jewish people to make matzahs before the exodus from Egypt anyway, which means matzahs represent 2 different things. Matzahs represent the idea of poor man's bread, what's called lechem oni. Interestingly enough, the Ibn Ezra, who lived we're going back, 900 years perhaps. Ibn Ezra says that in his day, the slaves were fed matzah. Matzah is a pretty economical food, right? It's just flour and water, and you eat, and it fills you up. It fills you up for a long time as well. We're not talking about hand-baked shmura matzahs, which is what somebody once pointed out. It's called lechem oni, poor man's bread, because once you paid for them, that's what you are. But the just regular, the idea of regular matzah, of taking flour and water and mixing it together and baking it it's quick, it's economical, it's very filling. So the idea of eating matzah in order to represent the fact that we were slaves in Egypt. However, it's also called lechem cherut. It's also the bread of redemption, which is by eating this bread, we are showing our allegiance to God. Right? So again, it's a very beautiful idea. It's Sfas Emes, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, the second Rebbe from Gur. He says like this. He says there's one thing on Seder night, there's one thing which doesn't change from the beginning to the end, and that's we're slaves from the beginning to the end. We start off as slaves of Paro, and we change over and become slaves of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And says the slaves of God. Says the Sfas Emes, a very beautiful idea. He says there's nothing wrong with being a slave, with being an Eved. The question is, what are you an Eved to? If you're an Eved to God, that's terrific. If you're an Eved to something else, that's not so terrific, right? And that's why Moses, at the end of his life, God calls Moses Moshe Avdi. The highest accolade that could possibly be given by God to somebody, that this is my servant, Moshe Avdi, right? So we eat matzah. It's a twofold reason. At the beginning of the Seder, the matzah represents the slavery, and later on, the matzah represents the freedom. Yeah.
I don't know if I should ask.
Because you're commanded to eat matzah even when you're eating like the lamb and you're drinking wine and you're supposed to be like a king.
Yeah.
Right? That's before you even leave. So obviously the bread had time to rise.
Yeah. So I think the whole idea is something. The whole thing over here is symbolic. There's no doubt about that, right? It's interesting. Yeast by the rabbis is described. You know what yeast does to bread? Yeast to dough. I'm sorry. Yeast turns dough into bread, right? One of the greatest pleasures in the culinary world, one of the greatest pleasures that there are is fresh baked bread.
Fresh baked bread.
Bread that's just come out of the oven. It's absolutely delicious, right? I mean, I think everybody here would agree with that. It's fantastic. Even if it's just simple bread, never mind fancy kinds of bread, but it's simple bread. But the stuff that comes out of the oven, it's fresh. It's fantastic. Yeast is also what allows bread to become stale, which means we all agree that fresh baked bread, here I did it, right?
Yeah.
Is absolutely delicious, but leave it a couple of days and it's unedible. It's horrible, right? The rabbis explain that yeast is like the ego. What does the ego do? The ego puffs you up, right? But it also has the ability of turning you into something which is stale. In your avodat Hashem, in worshipping God, it detaches you. It turns you into something stale. Right, which means that we've got to go through a process. Pesach is all about removing the ego and connecting ourselves to God, and then slowly but surely building our egos up in a healthy way, in a spiritually healthy way, to reach Shavuot, where we're going to eat the shtei alechem, right? The offering that was brought on Shavuot to the temple was very much bread, right? Leavened, chometz, the real thing. But at that point, it's an idea of working on yourself in order to reach the point where you can not only live with your ego, but you can use your ego to draw you closer to God. It becomes a positive dimension. Yeah.
Is that why we burn bread on chametz, or burn bread on?
According to the rabbis who deal with Musa, trying to turn us into better people. You don't have to burn your chometz. If you don't have any chometz, then you don't have to burn it, right? If you've cleaned your house out properly, right, then you shouldn't have any chometz left to burn on Erev Pesach. However, we leave aside some on purpose to be able to burn. right? And the Balei Musa, the rabbis who teach us Musa, are teaching us that it's very, very symbolic. What are you doing? You're burning out. You're getting rid of that negative ego, in order to be able to rebuild it and turn it into something positive. So it becomes a very symbolic thing. And there are actually tefillahs that are said. There are prayers that you can say after you've thrown it all into the fire, of talking about the, taking a person and rebuilding himself, and the symbolism of what it is that you're doing.
Just go back to Omer for a second. Is there anything that one should be learning during the Omer?
Yeah. Again, the Balei Musa say that the correct thing to be learning, together with a regular schedule, but maybe to add in something that is going to help us to become a little better than we were, right? Sfiras HaOmer turned into a time which was not so great, where the Talmidim, the students of Rabbi Akiva, died, and subsequently we should be learning how to interrelate better with each other, right? So,
Missa, basically.
sorry?
Missa.
Yeah, but in all different kinds of shapes and forms. Whatever's going to help you to get to the point where you're going to be able to internalize the messages. Yeah.
Is there some sort of explanation for why 22,000 devout students of Rabbi Akiva all perished?
Yeah, there is. The Gemara says like this: "Shalom nagu kovod zeh b'zeh," that they didn't give each other the respect that they deserved. So I once heard a fascinating idea. If we would have been alive then and we would have gone to watch these people, we wouldn't have seen anything, right? But because these people were the future leaders of the Jewish nation, their interpersonal relationships had to be something which reflected a certain sense of perfection. And the fact that they didn't interrelate with each other in the best way possible is an indication that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was unhappy with what was going on. He felt that these people weren't worthy to be the future leaders of the Jewish people. I once heard an interesting idea. It's something we can all apply it to ourselves. I think it's very clear. You can learn from somebody who knows less than you, right? You got somebody who said something. You're smarter than they are. You're more intelligent than they are. But they said something which you didn't know. You can learn from them. There's nothing threatening about that. You can certainly learn from people who are greater than you are. The most difficult people to learn from are your peers. Right? We're supposed to be all on the same level, which means you can't be better than I am because we're the same, aren't we? And it's very, very often it's very difficult for a person to learn from his peers. And one of the problems over here inside of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva was perhaps a slight difficulty they had in learning from each other, which translated itself into the most enormous tragedy. I guess back to that kind of an issue again. Yeah.
Ego trips.
Was the 22,000 the total number of students?
Yeah. He had 22,000. The largest yeshiva in the world. That wasn't in one place. It was spread out all over Israel. They were learning all over the place. The Gemara actually describes them being 12,000 chavrusas. It wasn't 24,000 people, but rather it was 12,000 chavrutot, so 12,000 times 2. And they were learning everywhere, and these were the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. 24. I'm sorry, 12,000 chavrutot.
Right.
Yeah, 20. Did I say 22?
No, somebody said 22.
I don't know. If it was me, I apologize. If it was me, you should apologize for listening because no one else.
When he
no one
first
else
came
seemed
to
to
his
catch
wife,
it.
he brought in only 12.
12, yeah.
Right, right.
And then he went back. It was 12 years that he learned. Then he went back and learned for another 12 years. Huh?
It's the
Same rabbi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, I guess the moral of the story is that we need to be nice to each other.
Didn't pursue.
I don't have time to talk about it today, but if you want tomorrow.
Did you say barley is okay, Pesach?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's a great.
Right.
People that have gluten problems. So Pesach is first of all, Pesach is very easy because there's no gluten in any of the food, except for the matzahs. But now they have spelt matzahs and oat matzahs. And if you thought that your hand-baked shmura matzahs were expensive, you wait till you have to buy these things because these things are wild. But so Baruch Hashem, nowadays it's a lot easier to people suffering from celiac or other gluten-related diseases. It's much easier to get through Pesach than it ever used to be. Anyway, we're going to stop over here. It's Hashem to be continued.
Thank you.